Let me break down what just unfolded over the past 48 hours because this is genuinely shocking. If you've been following mainstream American news outlets, you've probably heard that Trump just landed a huge victory in trade talks with Canada. That's the narrative they're pushing. But when you actually dig into the paperwork, the reality is startlingly different. Mark Carney just outplayed Donald Trump so decisively, so strategically, that future historians will study this as a prime example of how to defeat a bully using his own tactics. Canada came out on top, the United States came out behind, and American shoppers and businesses are about to feel the consequences of Trump's miscalculation. Now, here's why this situation is critically important. For half a year, Trump has been threatening Canada with crushing tariffs, pushing for renegotiated trade conditions, claiming that Canada was exploiting the United States and promising to end it. He held rallies. He fired off aggressive posts online. He told his supporters he was going to make Canada pay, protect American jobs, and prove that America won't be pushed around anymore. Then yesterday, Trump appeared before cameras and announced a fresh agreement with Canada. He labeled it a fantastic deal, possibly the greatest trade deal ever made. He claimed Canada had finally accepted fair conditions and that American workers would see enormous benefits. But here's the catch. The actual agreement text, released 6 hours after his press event, reveals something entirely different. Canada surrendered nothing, absolutely nothing. In fact, Canada secured meaningful new benefits, while the United States accepted limitations and expenses that didn't previously exist. Mark Carney played Trump flawlessly, and Trump either doesn't grasp what he signed or he's misleading the American public about the agreement's contents. Either scenario spells disaster for the United States. Let me walk you through what really took place because the specifics matter and they expose just how thoroughly Trump was outsmarted. 3 months back, Trump delivered an ultimatum. He informed Canada that unless they met his requirements, he would slap 25% tariffs on all Canadian products entering America. His demands were substantial. Eliminate Canada's dairy supply management system, remove digital services taxes targeting American tech giants, guarantee energy shipments to the U.S. at prices below market rates, accept caps on Canadian steel and aluminum output. These weren't minor requests. These were fundamental restructuring demands aimed at benefiting American industries at Canada's expense. Carney's answer? No, but he didn't just refuse and walk away. He declined, then offered Trump a counteroffer, one that appeared on the surface like Canada was backing down. But read the fine print and you'll see Canada gave up nothing meaningful while extracting enormous concessions from the United States. Here is what the agreement actually says. First, dairy. Trump wanted complete American access to Canada's dairy sector. He's complained about Canadian dairy protections for years. In the New Deal, Canada agreed to permit a modest increase in American dairy imports. How much exactly? An extra 50 million worth of American dairy annually. 50 million sounds substantial until you realize Canada's dairy market is worth 20 billion yearly. That $50 million represents 0.25%, 1/4 of 1%, a statistical blip. And for that symbolic gesture, the United States agreed to keep existing restrictions on Canadian dairy exports to America, meaning Canada lost nothing and American dairy producers gained access to 0.25% of a market previously unavailable. Yet Trump went on television claiming he'd opened up Canadian dairy. He made it sound like American farmers now have unlimited access. That's not remotely what happened. Second, digital services taxes. Canada has a tax on revenue generated by major tech corporations operating within Canada. Companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon. These giants earn billions in Canada but pay minimal Canadian taxes because they funnel profits through Ireland or similar tax shelters. Canada's digital services tax makes them pay a small percentage based on revenue, not profit. Trump demanded Canada eliminate that tax. He called it discriminatory against American businesses. In the new agreement, Canada agreed to pause the digital services tax, but only temporarily, and only if the OECD completes a global digital tax framework within 2 years. If the OECD finalizes that framework, which they're highly likely to, Canada will simply implement the global tax, which mirrors the tax they already had. And if the OECD doesn't finalize it, Canada's tax automatically returns. So Canada suspended a tax for 2 years in exchange for nothing, and they get to reinstate it with international legitimacy once the OECD framework is ready. Meanwhile, Trump is claiming he permanently eliminated the tax. That's not what the document states. Third, energy. This is where things get genuinely fascinating. Trump wanted Canada to guarantee energy deliveries to the United States at locked-in prices. He wanted contracts securing oil, natural gas, and electricity exports regardless of global market fluctuations. Canada refused, completely refused. Instead, the agreement states that Canada will maintain current export volumes to the United States under market-based pricing. That's the exact wording, market-based pricing. Translation, Canada will sell energy to America, but at whatever price the market dictates. If worldwide energy costs rise, Canada isn't required to offer America a discount. And if Canada finds buyers willing to pay more, say China or Europe, Canada can redirect supply. The agreement also contains a provision allowing Canada to reduce energy exports to America if doing so becomes necessary to meet Canadian domestic requirements or environmental obligations. That clause didn't exist in prior agreements. Canada just wrote themselves an exit strategy, letting them cut American supply whenever they determine it serves Canada's interest. So Trump got no supply guarantee and no price guarantee. But he's telling Americans he secured the nation's energy future. That's false. Fourth, and this is the part that's going to hurt American businesses the most, the agreement introduces new rules of origin requirements for manufactured products. This is technical, but crucial. Under the previous system, a product could receive duty-free status if a certain percentage of its parts were made in North America. The new agreement raises that threshold and specifies that a higher percentage must originate specifically from Canada or Mexico, not just anywhere in North America. What does this mean practically? American manufacturers who assemble products in the U.S. using components from Asia or Europe will have a harder time qualifying for duty-free access to Canadian markets. They'll face tariffs unless they source more components from Canada. This massively advantages Canadian suppliers. American companies are now incentivized to purchase Canadian parts instead of American parts if they want to sell finished products in Canada without tariffs. Trump just agreed to a rule making American manufacturers less competitive and Canadian suppliers more competitive, and somehow he believes he won. Now here's where Carney's strategy becomes absolutely brilliant. While Trump focused on these four issues, dairy, digital taxes, energy, and manufacturing, Carney quietly embedded a series of provisions into the agreement that fundamentally shift leverage toward Canada. Provision 1, the agreement requires the United States to provide 90 days notice before imposing new tariffs on Canadian products. During that period, Canada has the right to demand binding arbitration. If Canada requests arbitration, the tariffs can't take effect until arbitration concludes. This means Trump can't do what he's done for 6 years, threaten sudden arbitrary tariffs to pressure Canada. Now Canada has a legal tool to delay and contest those tariffs. Massive win for Canada. Provision 2, the agreement creates a joint U.S. Canada Trade Commission authorized to review and adjust terms every 2 years. This commission operates on consensus, meaning both nations must agree to changes. Practically speaking, the U.S. can't unilaterally alter the agreement. If Trump or a future president wants renegotiation, they need Canada's approval. Canada can simply refuse, and the terms remain unchanged. Provision 3, and this is the kicker, the agreement contains a most favored nation clause stating if the United States offers superior trade terms to any other nation, those identical terms automatically extend to Canada. If the U.S. signs trade deals with the UK, Japan, or anyone else containing more favorable conditions than Canada received, Canada automatically receives those conditions too. Canada benefits from all future U.S. trade agreements without negotiating for them. Trump agreed to that. He locked America into giving Canada the best terms offered to anyone. That's an extraordinary concession, and I guarantee Trump didn't comprehend what he was signing. Let me tell you what happened behind the scenes, because this explains how Carney pulled this off. Trump's negotiating team, such as it is, focused entirely on headline issues: dairy, taxes, energy. They wanted to tell Trump we secured concessions on dairy, we got language on digital taxes, we addressed energy, and they did get language on those topics, language that sounds impressive in press releases but doesn't actually change anything substantive. Meanwhile, Carney's team concentrated on structural provisions: the arbitration clause, the joint commission, the most favored nation provision, the rules of origin modifications. Those are what actually matter, and those are what Canada won. Carney handed Trump symbolic victories he could tout to his base. In return, Canada secured legal safeguards and structural advantages, benefiting them for decades. That's not negotiation. That's a masterclass in strategic thinking. Now, let me walk you through what the fallout from this is going to look like, because the consequences will be significant and arrive quickly. First, American manufacturers will face a dilemma due to new rules of origin requirements. Within 6 months, they'll have to choose: either source more components from Canada, which increases costs and reduces margins, or pay tariffs to access Canadian markets, which reduces competitiveness. Either way, American manufacturers lose. Many will respond by relocating production to Canada, where they can source locally and avoid the issue. Translation: jobs leaving the United States for Canada. Second, American energy prices are going to be more volatile because Canada isn't locked into supplying America at fixed prices. Canadian energy companies will sell to whoever pays most. If Europe or Asia offers better prices, Canada redirects supply. When that happens, American prices spike. We witnessed this exact scenario last winter. Canada reduced gas exports to the U.S. and sold more to Europe because European prices were higher. American utilities paid more, and consumers absorbed those costs. This will continue and worsen because the agreement explicitly permits it. Third, American tech companies aren't actually getting the relief Trump promised. The digital services tax is paused, not eliminated. When it returns, either under the OECD framework or Canadian law, it'll apply, sometimes retroactively. Google, Amazon, Facebook, they're all going to end up paying. Trump merely postponed the inevitable and declared victory. Fourth, and this is the most important long-term consequence, American credibility in trade negotiations is completely shot. Think about this from other nations' perspectives. Trump issued massive threats. He demanded major concessions. He said he'd economically crush Canada if they didn't comply. What happened? Canada refused, offered a counter-proposal giving Trump nothing substantive, and Trump signed it and called it a win. Every other country is watching and learning that Trump's threats are hollow, that if you stand firm and offer symbolic concessions he can spin as victories, he'll fold. This makes every future negotiation harder for America because no one will take American threats seriously anymore. If you're watching this from Canada, you need to understand that your government just protected your interests while making it look like they compromised. Carney gave Trump a press conference and a photo opportunity, and in exchange, Canada secured legal protections, structural advantages, and the flexibility to manage trade on Canada's terms. Canadian dairy farmers are fine. Canadian tech policy is intact. Canadian energy companies can sell to the highest bidder, and Canadian manufacturers just got a competitive advantage over their American rivals. That is a win, a clear, unambiguous win. If you're watching this from the United States, you need to understand that your government just got played. Trump is telling you that he secured a great deal, that he protected American workers, that he stood up to Canada. None of that is true. American manufacturers are going to face higher costs. American energy consumers are going to face higher prices. American tech companies are going to pay the digital services tax anyway, and the United States just gave up leverage in future negotiations. This is not winning. This is losing while pretending you won. Here is the bottom line. Mark Carney outmaneuvered Donald Trump by offering symbolic victories on issues that don't matter while securing structural advantages on issues that do. Canada surrendered 0.25% of its dairy market, temporarily paused a tax that's returning anyway, and made zero binding energy commitments. In exchange, the United States accepted rules favoring Canadian manufacturers, gave Canada legal mechanisms to block future tariffs, and committed to offering Canada the best terms given to anyone. American businesses and consumers will pay through higher costs, lost jobs, and diminished competitiveness. And Trump is declaring victory because either he doesn't understand what he signed or he's lying to save face. Either way, Canada wins, the United States loses, and the world is learning that American threats are worthless and American negotiators are incompetent. This isn't strength, this is humiliation disguised as success. And almost nobody in American media is telling you the truth about it, but now you know.